Hello and welcome to the Media Center's series of Local Heroes, in which we showcase a total of 6 people from Atherton, East Palo Alto, Menlo Park, and Stanford for outstanding achievements or contributions to the community. We solicited nominations and we're particularly looking for the unsung heroes. Each winner is an inspiration and each has a great story to tell. We're here at Cafe Baroni in downtown Menlo Park, right next door to Kepler's, and we'd like to thank Baroni's for having us. Doug Adams has been a successful businessman and a member of the local Rotary for years, but it may be his most recent contribution to the Rotary Club that's the most memorable. He has created a tutoring program for immigrant children. Doug, thank you for coming.
Well, thank you for having me.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Where did the tutoring program come from?
Well, it kind of is a culmination of years of thinking about what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And so when I was a chair of a scholarship committee for the Rotary Club back in the 90s, it was very obvious the difference with the students graduating and applying for scholarships as to what their backgrounds were and how they were able to contribute to the community. Obviously, those that had a different upbringing were not able to do some of the community service work that others were. So in looking at that and talking with the students, finding out who their mentors were, especially in the high school area, it found out it was parents and all kinds of other people. So as this formulated, I finally decided that tutoring would be the best way for me to spend time giving back to the community.
Actually, what did you find among the different populations about who the mentors were? Are there differences among immigrant groups and native speakers?
Probably, I would say that those family situations that weren't stable, it was often an outside person who became the actual mentor. And very interesting stories about grandmothers, aunts, and uncles. Often it was the mother and father, but a lot of times it was outsiders who stepped in, and those were the students that really blossomed.
Do you think your program does that? I mean, do you often feel that you and the people who work with you fill that extra role?
Well, we're working at the 3rd and 4th grade levels, so it's a little different. And we'll only see the students for 1 or 2 years. So we're really working at a whole different level, because what I found out in looking at tutoring was that the ability of a student at the 3rd or 4th grade level, if they were not able to read and write at that particular time, up to grade level, they were more likely to have problems all through school. So we kind of decided at that point that was the place for us to work. And it was very graphically put to me about a year ago on a little website called Project Read, and it said you go from learning to read to reading to learn. And that's where vocabulary and comprehension come in, and not just being able to read words. So that was kind of the transformation.
So developmentally, is that where that transition takes place, along about 3rd grade?
Well, that's where they have to be proficient, because if they're not, there's so much of the education from that point forward is all based on the ability to read and reading assignments, as opposed to teachers talking and putting things on the board all day long.
Low-flying pigeons, sorry. So you chose 3rd grade because of research in terms of that's where it's critical to learn language?
3rd and 4th grade, right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was very clear that was the area to play catch up if they weren't already there. And the students are a little more mature, so they can sit for 45 minutes rather than 30 minutes. We did some 2nd graders for a while, but they weren't quite ready to sit that long and work on some of these things. So it was a process.
So you really target language above all else, I would guess, and reading.
Yes, it's primarily literacy. We get into math a little bit with the multiplication tables and things at that grade level, and a little geography, either through our stories or some of the tutors take trips, and so we'll talk about where we've been, and we have globes and maps in the room. So we'll get into other things, but primarily it's vocabulary and comprehension is what we're really working on at this point in time.
And it's one-on-one?
It's one-on-one, one time a week, generally about 45 minutes.
How many tutors?
Right now we have about 20. We're down a few this year. We had 4 tutors leave this year that have been doing it for 8 years, and they all just said, Doug, we're tired. So, but normally we have about 25.
And I didn't mention the name of the school, so I'd like you to do that. So
It's Garfield Charter School on Middlefield Road, and it's just in the corner of Menlo Park and Redwood City, right next to St. Anthony's Church.
When you look at these kids, and their cultures are completely different if they're immigrants, most of them from Latin America, how are their lives totally different? How are what they are surrounded by totally different? And give me some examples if you can.
Well, first, we can't make too many generalizations because there is a cross-section there, but the school has around 700 students, of which 500 are considered underserved or not, they're called English language learners. And that's primarily where the work has to really be remedial and work. So that's the starting point that we're working with. And so we're dealing with families in a community. It's a very self-sufficient community down in the Fair Oaks area. It's primarily Spanish-speaking. A lot of the parents speak only Spanish at home. Some parents aren't even literate in Spanish. So, I mean, it really kind of runs the whole gamut as far as backgrounds are concerned. And of course, other students are much more proficient, and we're not working with those.
Right,
so we're working with the basic English language learners.
And they're also tend to be the lower socioeconomic rung that you're working with.
Just because where they're coming from, and it's a lot of them come to school looking very tired, and as one little young man told me when I first started tutoring with him, he said, I asked him what a picture of a bed was because he had not spoken any English and he had just arrived from Mexico and he didn't know what a bed was. And I said, well, that's what you sleep on. And he said, no, I sleep on the floor with my 3 brothers. So you have many children in the same room oftentimes, so they don't get a lot of sleep, they get distractions, so they come tired, and that's first thing a new tutor says, gee, they always seem so tired. And the teachers will even say that that's true. So those are all little things that we have to deal with.
Yeah. What are some of the other strikes against them in addition to the language?
Well, I think that's primarily it. They're coming from homes, by and large, that are very loving families. The culture is very much family-oriented, community-oriented. So they do receive a lot of attention. It's just that most of these people down there are coming from Michoacan, a very poor area in Mexico. Education is not valued, so they don't even know how to work with the students. So we're spending time, similarly trying to work with the parents to have them spend more time with the children.
The kids themselves, when you get down to it, are they different?
Not at all. They're very attentive, very appreciative. They're sweet. I mean, the biggest thing that I find every time when you have a new student and you go to shake their hand, you get a very weak little handshake and they won't look you in the eye. And this is, from what I've learned, is part of the culture, that they respect their elders, and their way of respecting them is not to look them in the eye. So I have to shake their hand, tell them to squeeze my hand hard and look me in the eye. So after about 2 or 3 weeks, they get onto that. And they also warm up after 2 or 3 weeks, after they've gotten to know you a little bit and work with you. So it just takes that process. Yeah.
What about motivation and discipline? I guess one-on-one is way easier than a teacher with a whole classroom. Yeah. But is there sometimes a lack of motivation, and if so, how do you deal with it?
Motivation, we don't have real problems with motivation with the group that we're working with right now, because I'm not sure it's cause or effect, but the kids we're working with now are working at a little higher level. They're still not what we call proficient, but they seem to be motivated. Now, are they motivated because they're a little above the average, or did the motivation actually get them there? So I can't honestly answer that question, but we find that they're motivated, they're eager, and at that age, they generally are eager. I mean, they haven't, gotten tough yet or whatever.
Teenagers yet.
So anyway, that's another good reason for working with them, because you do get the feedback, you get the response, and if you ask any of the tutors, they just love the kids.
Well, what, if anything, is the most difficult part then? What's the biggest challenge?
Well, it's clearly working and spending enough time in the literacy. Having them basically learn how to really read for meaning. And so we use workbooks a lot, and with questions at the end. And you let them read a story, and they'll read the story beautifully, and they can't tell you a word about it and can't answer the question. So after you've established that, you go back and you take it paragraph by paragraph, and oftentimes I'll ask them 2 or 3 words in that paragraph, or I'll ask them if they don't understand a word, and they'll tell me. And sometimes we try and figure out, based on the paragraph and the context, what the meaning of that word is. So let's face it, that's what they have to do all their lives. They don't always have a dictionary there and stuff. So we work on that. And we do use dictionaries, of course, but we're trying to have understanding. And a lot of students still don't know what to actually look for. So what we do is we go back and we read the questions first to find out what's going to be looked for in the story. And then after we've read the questions, then we go back and read the story and try and remember and answer those questions right on the spot.
So you tutor and you mentor other tutors. What makes a good tutor?
Just interest. I mean, we're working with friends. In fact, a tutor is just walking by right now. He was giving me a little bad time.
Great.
So we're working with prepared what we call worksheets that have a story, and then they have questions at the end. National Geographic has a great series of books. We have old tests from the state that they release so that we know and understand what they're looking for in tests. Now, that's not preparing for tests, but that's saying these are the standards that we need to have our children at.
So it sounds like you're also providing a tremendous framework. So it's not just an adult who is very interested,
no,
but you're giving them a lot of tools.
Well, we hope so, you know, and so the tutors love doing it. So that's the important part.
Now, you tried a couple of these that weren't that successful. What is the secret to an overall program's success?
Well, in our case, we had one that did not work out, and it was most honestly the commitment of the administration at that particular environment. And it had been handed to them by somebody up above, and so it just didn't work.
So that commitment is key.
Yeah, the commitment. When I called Garfield, a friend said, "Oh, call Maria at Garfield." She said, "Doug, when can we meet?" And I said, "Next week." She said, "How many tutors do you have?" I said, 12. She said, "Fantastic." She had 30 little booklets ready to go. And so we've been there, and that's 8 years now.
Great.
So and the teachers. And it took a year or two for the teachers really to be comfortable with it, because we're taking the child out of class at a time when they want us to take it out. It's kind of a mutually arranged time. But certainly the commitment of the teachers and the administration is important.
You expanded this to include a trip to a college. Tell me just briefly about that. And you had a great quote from one of the keynote speakers.
Yeah. Right up the street is Menlo College, which is a small private 4-year college, and we've worked with them the last 2 years as a community service project for the students at Menlo to bring our 7th graders over to visit a college. Most of them are familiar with Kenyatta College, but not the 4-year concept. So we brought them over on a bus and had a regular field trip out of it. We had lunch and had about 25, 30 students right there, Menlo students with us, and there were about 65 7th graders this year. So they took us around, visit the dormitory, the bookstore, the rec room, and it so happened this year the recreation room, we had to use it because it was raining outside, and a bunch of the baseball players came in, and they were working with mostly boys, some girls, lifting weights in the little weight room and playing foosball and shuffleboard and everything. Just a totally delightful thing. But that's all in preparation for a fellow by the name of Gail Ortega, who's the director of community services. And so we put them into a lecture hall. It has about 100 seats, and it's all elevated so the speaker can see everybody eyeball to eyeball. And he starts talking about education. And so he makes a couple of very key points. One is choose your friends carefully, because they're the ones that are going to get you into trouble. So if you're choosing somebody that gets into trouble, you're going to get into trouble. Mm-hmm. But the real stopping moment was when he asked all the students, how many of you have relatives or friends who have been in jail? And about a third of the hands went up. And this was true last year also, about the same ratio. And so he said, well, this is what education is for. He said, what you need to do is you need to be in an area where you don't have those kinds of problems. And so you need to get the education to break that. So pick your friends, pick your school, and really go to work on education.
Wow. Now,
there was a little feedback that came because Gail and I went back over to the school. This was last year. We haven't done it yet because we just had college day. But about I was 6 or 7, I'd say, students came over and said thank you to him.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so they were listening.
Good, good.
And but I thought choosing your friends carefully was a very big point.
Good. Well, that's a good place to end.
Okay.
Any information you want to give about people who might want to tutor or know more about the program?
Well, we'd love to have more tutors. We can always use more. There are plenty of students who would love to have a tutor. It's kind of a status thing around there now. So I guess the best way to do that would be to call Garfield School and talk to the receptionist and just say they're interested in tutoring. And you can mention the Rotary tutoring program.
Perfect.
Or you can call me. I'm fine. I can.
Okay.
Should I give the phone number?
Well, that's all right. We'll put up the phone numbers anyway. So.
Okay, and the email address. Yeah. So we'd love to have tutors. All that we ask is the same time every week.
Right.
If you're going to take a trip, that's fine. We can make up or just miss a week. But the students like to know that their tutor is going to come and see them at the time they're there.
Great. I want to thank you for coming, and I want to give you our little plaque here.
Oh, well, thank you.
You can
that's nice.
Show your students.
Okay, we'll post it in the room. How's that?
Good enough.
Thank you.
We are here at Cafe Baroni once again, next to Kepler's. Want to encourage you to come down and have a drink, a snack, a meal, buy a book or two. And we'd like to thank Baroni's for having us, and thank you for watching.